Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dave Roller, founder and president of Profit2. Profit2 specializes in helping distributors optimize their pricing strategies so that they can unlock stronger profit potential. As you will hear, Dave is one of us. He isn't a software guy. He comes from a distribution background and recognized the tremendous challenge in building a winning pricing program. He and I talk about some of the common mistakes in distributor pricing and how those can be found and modified without a degree in computer science. This is the blocking and tackling of making more money. I enjoyed learning more about his philosophy, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by in-SQL Distribution Software. in-SQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than in-SQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right, Dave. Hey, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you for coming on the show.
Jason, it's a pleasure. Nice to talk to you again.
Absolutely. I mean, I think pricing is one of those things that's just absolutely fascinating. It's an art and a science, and I'll tell you, it can be one of the most baffling and confusing things for most companies. So I'm glad there are people like you out there to help make a little bit of sense of it.
Well, thank you so much.
You know, Dave, as you've heard a couple episodes in the past, one of the things I love to dive into is your history. I mean, why are you involved with distribution? And now why are you involved with pricing?
Well, the short answer is I worked myself out of a job.
Okay.
In distribution. I started in the business really part-time going to school. I worked a counter for a plumbing distributor. And after I got out of college, I started as a salesperson and kind of went through the ranks and eventually led a couple of companies. About 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to lead a mid-size industrial distributor in the Kansas City area. And we decided that we were going to work to try to improve profitability and then merge it into a portfolio of other companies. So My wife and I were living in Kansas City at the time. We had a couple of school-age kids and didn't want to move. And so we decided that it was time to look at some other opportunities.
Now, essentially, was that a rolling up of different companies? I know roll-up's not really an in vogue term any longer. We call it, M&A work and those types of things. But was this you were trying to basically put together a series? Was it in that same plumbing space, or what area were you in?
It was actually in the general industrial, selling to a lot of food processors, the Tysons,
I got you.
Sara-Lees of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And then really, you did not want to move. Was that basically the reason you said, okay, I need to find another job. I need to do something different?
Maybe it was more desperation than inspiration. But
okay.
When I arrived at this company, what I found is that they had been growing sales in double digits for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so overall profitability was going up a little bit. But the margin, as I used to say at every board meeting, every quarter, was stagnant. And what I really meant was it was kind of slowly eroding bit by bit.
Gotcha.
So we were falling behind industry benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really out of desperation, we decided to really just go in deep in a way that I'd never had a chance to do in my career, to really look invoice line by invoice line at how we were pricing and why we were pricing that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of an aha moment for me.
Okay.
Along the line. I quickly figured out that my team and I knew a lot about pricing on 70% of what we sold. Mm-hmm. The key items, the commodities, the things that were very competitive, where the market provided a lot of feedback. And our pricing was pretty consistent. The other side of it was, though, on about 30% of our sales, It was chaos.
Why do you think that? I mean, why do you think it was chaotic compared to the other 70?
Well, I think part of it is just the sheer nature of our business. As you know, there are very few businesses that have the scale of the pricing challenge we have. When you think about it, a restaurant, they might have a few hundred pricing decisions to make.
Sure.
A manufacturer, maybe thousands. Our average distributor client makes 200 to 300,000 pricing decisions a year. And so just the sheer scale. Here's something else that I didn't know at the time. If you take those 200,000 pricing decisions, about 3/4 of those are on very incidental items where a customer is buying that item 2 or 3 times a year. They're spending a few $100s maybe. So there's not to go back to your question of why there's not much market feedback. When I was selling, I'd get one of these opportunities where, they might buy an odd item for $50. I had a very scientific formula, Jason. I'd take what I normally sold at and I would add 5 more points.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep. So, and I did that consistently. And here's the thing. I really thought I was doing the right thing for the business.
Yeah.
But the guy beside me, his rule was 10 points. And maybe the other guys with no points. And so it's logical when you're being in a situation where each item isn't very important, you've got no market feedback, it becomes idiosyncratic.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, that makes a lot of sense, Dave. I've seen, that kind of, as you said, chaotic pricing methodology in a lot of clients I've worked with. What will typically happen is the owner of that company will say, hey, I need some help. My margins aren't where they want to be. It's not that they know where they want to fix things. It's they just don't like what they're getting, and they're realizing that they're falling behind. And I think, back to your earlier point about the company was growing at exponentially, yet the margins were suffering. I mean, I think that could be a good way to put it. And I see that sometimes in those companies that are looking to grow fast to sell, and maybe they're not thinking about the margin side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it not only happens to companies that are trying to sell. If you think about it, there's so much culturally in our business that's oriented towards volume, towards growing sales.
Right.
So many of our customers started as small family-owned companies, and the founder might have been a strong salesperson or manager.
Absolutely. The majority of them are.
Yeah,
I mean, I think you just hit it right. Absolutely, they are.
So that culture kind of permeates. And I always admire how our customers have grown their business and the job their salespeople do. I think that they haven't had the same opportunity to do what a lot of industries have done, like the grocery store. The companies that have survived in that business, they've become very proficient at using their sales data and then using that. So when you walk in, and if you go to the bakery first, like I do, you're paying 80-90% margin.
Interesting.
Yeah, when you pick up that gallon of milk at the back of the store where they're hiding it, there's a reason they call it 2% milk. It's
low. Really? Oh, I did not know that.
Low single digits. So,
interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's kind of, well, again, I'm avoiding the bakery aisle from now on. Okay, there it is. I think you've just my diet will thank you for that. I think it is interesting when you start looking at this, again, the family-owned business, that's my sweet spot. That's where I spend, all of my time really. And they tend to be very sales dominated. I mean, I think we can just be very honest about that. Bigger sales, more sales. People get excited about sales, but not many of them love and talk about margins and improvement in margin or even EBITDA. That's one where you just don't see people at conventions walking around, man. Oh yeah, my EBITDA grew 2%, a percent or something like that. You just don't see them do it. They don't talk about it, but boy, they'll talk about their sales. They boast and crow about that sales side. So
there may be a bit of a generational shift happening, because when we start talking to the younger executives in distribution companies, if they be daughters or sons of current CEO, there's a little bit different sensibility and a greater comfort with the concept of data mining and utilization. So that's always a encouraging factor for us.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a self-professed data junkie. I mean, I love data. And I think you're absolutely right that typically it's that next generation, whether it's second or third or whoever it may be, that they recognize this opportunity to, to extract information. I mean, these ERP systems are gathering data, on your organization, your transactions, everything 24/7.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is just dip your net into it. That's it. This data stream, you just dip your net. There are treasures in there, but you just have to know where to look.
Well, it's not a mystery how so many online sellers, the Amazons, the other giants of the world, price. I mean, they're using factors that come through in the data that you're referring to. I mean, the item sales, how often a customer buys it, how much they spend on the category.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing. And they're converting that to a means to be able to figure out how sensitive an item is to a customer. In my view, one of the most important assets any distributor owns is their transaction data.
Mm-hmm.
I think they make them a lot more money.
Absolutely. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And again, it's that being able to go in and make sense of it. I mean, I think that's really the magic there is, again, the transaction data is there. It's just how do you extract it? I mean, BI is one way, but I think that's really where folks get maybe a little overwhelmed and a little confused about it. And I think that's really a challenge there. But if I could, I want to step back, and you started talking a little bit about e-comm, and I think that's something I'd like to bring up. You wrote an article, recently about talking about is your online pricing credible? And I thought this was something that was just fascinating. Could you walk us through that a little bit and talk about maybe what your thoughts were around that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk to distribution leaders and ask them about online pricing, there's a generalized discomfort with, am I pricing in the right manner? Am I too low and cannibalizing my profits, or am I losing price impression and promoting the competition? About a year ago, we did a study. We grabbed 25,000 items that distributors sold in 4 different industries: electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and general industrial distribution.
Yeah.
And we started going through and looking and comparing where each item was priced by the online giants.
Mm-hmm.
And how it compared with our clients' pricing. And we kind of came with 3 basic conclusions. The first conclusion was that on the most competitive items, the commodities that you sell, your margin is lower than the online giants, even at their discounted quantity price, appreciably lower on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
On the other end of the scale, some distributors are too high on the most incidental items they sell, and they're losing price impression. And that typically happens when they set their online pricing based on appealing to a walk-in or a pure cash customer.
Okay.
Third one, in the middle, there's an opportunity for distributors. They still typically are underneath the big guys online and could move up their margins a little bit online.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, I think that this has been a huge mystery, by the way. I mean, I know that many clients, first of all, they hate the online pricing out there because it feels like, they're handcuffed, or they get those price objections when people walk in the door and say, well, I can buy it so much cheaper. And I think that's that's just a visceral reaction. It's like, well, fine, go buy it. And you can wait a few days to get it. And, there's this visceral reaction, but it is something that they wish they knew how to combat better, or knew how to play that game a little bit better. And it sounds to me like there is some opportunity here.
Well, I think so. And when you start trying to understand how the online giants are pricing, it's not magical. If you start looking at the factors that influence their price, they're just what everyone would think. It's the sales of the item, the number of customers relative number of customers buying the item, the number of hits or events, the unit price range. Yeah. So that's what's determining their margin rate.
Mm-hmm.
Something that the online guys do better than the average distributor is they have a little bit more bandwidth when they price. Most distributors operate within a pretty narrow margin bandwidth.
Right.
The big customers might be sold at 20%, the smallest guys in the high 20% range. So that kind of puts you right in the middle, which is a dangerous place to be sometimes. I think that the key goes back to what we've been talking about, is how do you utilize the information you have in your transaction history to figure out where you need to be careful and where you can safely make a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think also in that article, you mentioned that many distributors are seeing an increase in their e-com traffic, due to lockdown and shutdowns and whatnot. And so it seems to me like a perfect time to really get this pricing shored up, because you're going to be missing opportunities if you do not get your arms around this.
Well, you read different articles and you see that, admittedly on a small base, but since the shutdown, that 2 and 3 times increase in the number of online transactions in our industry. And I agree. But something I would also mention, an opinion, is that your online pricing has to be part of the overall pricing strategy of your company. And sometimes in early conversations with our customers, they look at that almost as an adjunct.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or, I think I know, one company that I've worked with in the past, that it is a separate branch location is what they have. Their e-com is technically another branch, and the pricing is wildly different than it is in any of their other brick and mortar places. And so, yeah, that's really, it's interesting that they do really separate that out. But you would say that, no, it really should be part of that pricing matrix. It should really just be a function somewhere in there.
I would suggest that it's a delivery vehicle for your overall pricing matrix driven by a strategy.
Gotcha.
So, for example, in our programs, we typically are spending a good deal of time up front talking about customer stratification for pricing.
Okay. Tell us about that. I have my ideas about customer stratification, but tell me what that means to you.
Let me go out on the ledge and got to give you my
please.
opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I'll share. I'll open the kimono as well. So,
well, I think that in past lives, running distribution companies, I've been guilty of offering best price to too large a portion of my customers. And we walk in sometimes to a new client and find that 80-90% of their sales are going out at best price. You have a chance, and it's particularly important in rough economic times, to enrich the way that you're segmenting your customers for pricing. Sure, do it by industry where appropriate. Do it by sales and potential. Yes, so that you can get more for the big guys and the small, but then to start to bring in the measures that really impact your net profitability. Cost to serve. How do they pay their bills?
Right.
How many invoices are you doing? What's the delivery cost look like? And the overall profitability. And I'd be embarrassed to tell you how long I spent about 20 years ago trying to figure out customer segmentation. It was so complex. I didn't understand it. Nobody else did. You can use transaction data and a few other metrics to be able to enrich your customer stratification for pricing to allow you to differentiate what you charge one customer versus another. So that's my opinion. I'm completely out on the ledge now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'll tell you, Dave, I absolutely agree with this. I think that too many times I see if you were going to, and I really hate using the ABCs in customer ranking, but I think that, too many people do it volume based, and it's almost like that look and feel way of, stratifying your customers. It's like, oh, they're big guys but there is so much potential. And I really hate the word potential some days. I think it's so subjective. But when we get down to things like, how they pay their bills, love it, because that's easy. That is logical. I can pull that number. I know exactly how that works. If I look at cost to serve, well, there is a little bit more voodoo in there, but not that much. I agree with you. I look at number of transactions. I tend to look at how many transactions per year, and then what is my cost of an order? And I know that sometimes people get a little funny about that one, and they spend an awful lot of time. What does it cost me to process an order? But then you can get down to a really pretty darn good number as to whether this person is making you money or they're costing you money from a cost to serve basis.
And sometimes that's a scary number.
Oh, absolutely. Most people, when I do the report with people, and I do have a format here, I'll often call it the Jack Daniels or Maalox report, because you better have one of those next to you when you do it the first time.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right.
I will say one of the biggest things that scares people is that, there's a majority, sometimes it's upwards of 70, 75%, are technically net unprofitable when you do that.
You see that time and time again. And there are some customers that regardless of the margin, you're not going to make them profitable.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
But at the very least, you can include that in your pricing decisions and make progress towards that. The small guys that may not be profitable, yes, they help you with your buying volume.
Yes.
And other factors. But I see time and time again where the smallest customers who are never going to be profitable are priced within 5 to 10 margin points of the most valuable, most profitable customer a distributor has. And it hurts to see it.
Sure. Again, they don't utilize that opportunity that they have there. I think that there's a lot there that they can, and, maybe they like that person, and there's that whole, I like them, so I'm going to give them X. And it's like, they don't deserve it. They don't pay me for, 3 months, but I like them. So.
Yeah. Well, we all value the relationships with customers, but you have to also step back and take the bigger picture like you're suggesting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it takes a little bit of time to get through, to come to that realization that there is maybe a better way to look at those customers. But then, applying that to your pricing matrix, I think that's where the real opportunity is. I mean, rather than the ABC, big electrician, medium-sized electrician, small electrician, that's the kind of the archaic, way. And maybe that's more sophisticated than some people, that I've worked with. But really then looking at if ABC then is most profitable, mid-range, and then least profitable. I think that could be another way to go about that. And it sounds to me like that's something that you all do quite a bit of.
Yeah, it's kind of integral to our process.
Gotcha. This episode was brought to you by my friends at Profit2. Clients have shared that the big thing that sets Profit2 apart is their approach. From the moment you meet the team at Profit2, you get a sense that they know their business and how to help you make improvements safely. What you don't get is an arrogance found in some competitive services. They know that you're an expert in your business, and they seek to help you be just a little bit better. We know resources are harder than ever to find, and with the barrage of price increases, adjusting to the changes is a massive and oftentimes manual challenge. If you want to discover hidden margin opportunities without being talked down to, learn more at www.profit2.com. That's profit with a number 2. And be sure to let them know you heard about them on the Distribution Talk podcast. One other area that I ran across, it was an article you had talked about plugging, 5 pricing leaks, where we're losing money here. And would you mind, going down through a couple of those just to share with the listeners? Because I thought those were really things that sometimes people don't think about, plugging the leaks in the boat. They're always trying to sell more, but they forget about the leaks in the bottom of the boat.
Yeah, absolutely. The tough times, there's so much coming at you, and you're trying to restore sales growth. You're worried about your expenses. And sometimes these things slip underneath the radar. If I was a distributor executive today, the first thing I would do is get my customer contract, customer specific pricing record file, and I'd have it quantified. For each record, I'd want to know how much that customer had purchased against the record, how often, and at what margin. I would be willing to make a small wager that the average distributor would find 50 to 60% of those records are either unnecessary or they're counterproductive. And by unnecessary, I mean customers buying so little, they're not meeting the original expectation. Right. They should expire it, let it fall to a lower level of the pricing hierarchy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the ones that they should maintain should be evaluated. So for example, one of our tasks early on in our programs is we do what we're talking about here and go in and identify customer pricing records that can be safely increased. Mm-hmm. Typically, it's not very many margin points per, but each record that should be retained has a lot of sales and volume.
Dave, it's funny that you mentioned this. I think distributors have this irrational belief that their customers know what they should be paying for way more items than they really do. I think this is just one that kills me, and you know what's funny is that I'll ask this to audiences. I'll put that, what percent of a supplier line do you think your customers actually know what they should be paying for it? And most of them will say, less than 5%, but their pricing strategy does not reflect that. They'll say it, but they don't do it.
Oh gosh, the fear is so powerful. The fear of getting caught speeding on your price, or having to justify a price is strong enough that you almost sometimes think people believe their customers are omnipotent, that they know everything. And you're exactly right. It's 5% of items, 10% max. They don't know the margin. They don't buy it often enough. And they don't want to spend the time it takes to price shop an item they buy once or twice a year.
Right.
Combine that equals 30% of their overall purchases from you on average. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's funny. That's just kind of one of those that I always point to. Say, guys, there is at least 90% of a supplier line that you should be able to do a whole lot better than you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the magic area that you all get into.
Well, one of my personal pet peeves, I'll confess, is when you see pricing records set up for a customer on a product line basis.
Yeah.
Now, there's sometimes you have to do that. For example, an electrical distributor on all the different colors of wire.
Okay.
You probably have to do that sometimes. But time and time, you see that the distributors with the lowest margin in their industry are the ones that use blanket product group pricing the most. And I think part of that's convenience for the same person. They say, I'm going to give them a 25% margin on X line. When they make that pricing decision, they're thinking of a handful of very competitive items.
Yes, absolutely.
They're not thinking about the rest. And our view is that distributors can be more profitable if they skim the cream and price those key items on a granular basis and then raise the margin on the rest.
And Dave, I think everyone would agree with you too. I mean, I think when you pose it that way, everyone would agree with you, but it's the complication of doing that. I think that's where the barrier is, that these ERPs, especially in their pricing matrix programs or that piece, has become really complicated, and it's become very difficult to do exactly what you're saying right there. And that's the trouble, I think, in many cases. People would love to do what you're saying, but they don't know how.
Well, when people ask us about our business, I always say we're tacticians. We're not strategists. I think the strategy for anyone who's been in our business of pricing is pretty simple. How do you get more by figuring out what is less price sensitive? Your point about it's so hard is apt. So our value add, I guess, if you boil it all down, is to have a specialized set of analytics experience in doing this that allows distributors to reach in to that vast group of items and transactions and customers and figure out how to do some of the things we're talking about. That's what we do.
Yeah. And that's just, again, one of those things that I can't tell you how many clients, ask me about pricing, and especially when they're going into a new ERP, they want to shore up their pricing.
Yes.
And it's tough. I mean, again, from the tactical side, it's tough to do it. Many of them just don't want to dedicate that time that's required to do it. I think that's another barrier here.
It is. Everybody seems wears multiple hats in distribution. And so there are times, and we do it in our business, where it makes sense to bring in extra dedicated resources that have experience in a particular area.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. If somebody is a pro in that particular ERP, do it. Use them. Use them to find what fields to pull and where to throw things, and how that matrix is devised, because they're not all the same. I mean, there's a general logic to them, but there are nuances that frankly, just you start wasting your time. If somebody knows it better, go for it. Let them do it.
Well, I agree on the ERPs, and beyond that, I think it's important that distributors have a pricing system that fits their culture and the way they want to price, so it sticks, it's sustainable. And I was always a little bit irked when I was sitting in that chair by someone who would come in and go, this is the cookie cutter approach. It's proven, do X. But we don't want to do it that way. We need to find a way to utilize the tools of the ERP pricing module to help our distributor clients price the way they want to. That's how you build a pricing program that creates a profit annuity over time. It stays around. It keeps bringing you more over time.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you just hit it right on the head. I mean, you make a change and you get to reap the benefit of that for months, years to come. And also you're flying under the radar. I think that's another part of this. You don't want to be too overt. And where, as you said, you're going to get caught speeding. But there are so many ways to fly under the radar, and you're not being deceptive. You're just pricing the things the way they should be priced. I mean, we're supposed to be in business to make a profit here, and why are we always the ones getting the short end of the deal?
Yeah. Well, we've all had customers who are ritual price checkers who would spend $1 to save a dime.
Sure.
However, they're the minority. Most of our customers, they have to be focused where their spend is at, where the majority of dollars are at. And this is a cliche, but distributors really underappreciate their value to their customers in what they provide. And they need to be confident. And what we're talking about here is not the difference between night and day. It's making another 4, 5, 6 points of margin on that class of sales. And just doing that makes a world of difference.
Oh, you bet it does. Absolutely. Absolutely. One thing that you had mentioned, and actually it was in another article, but I thought it really tied back to this plugging of leaks, was missed rebate opportunities. Could you explain that a little bit? That was an eyebrow raise for me.
Well, every industry that our customers are in, they have special pricing allowances or rebates.
Yeah.
And one thing that kind of, in our analysis, we look at each of these items on a customer by customer basis. And we flag when there's a current rebate that our customers are getting for that particular customer.
From the manufacturer, right? We're not talking about the other way around, but it's from the manufacturer to the distributor.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah. Just as you start looking at the price versus the sales, sometimes if you start looking at where our customers have manufacturer rebates, and then you look at other customers where they're selling into, they have a similar sales volume, they're purchasing at the same level, they don't have a rebate. And you start wondering, is my customer, the distributor, getting their fair share of that pool of manufacturer rebate dollars? My opinion is the process is a little chaotic. It's a matter of asking. So what we try to do is pinpoint where a customer, or there's a rebate being given by the manufacturer on that item to some of their customers, but similar customers aren't covered by that rebate.
Okay.
Even if you already have the business, you got to hang on to that business and make sure a competitor doesn't go and get that price support and try to compete for that item.
So, Dave, are you seeing people apply these rebate dollars to basically their cost, so that they can find ways to either shore up the gross margin? Are they applying it into the cost, or are they keeping it separate?
It's a mixed bag, as you'd expect.
Yeah.
Recently, we've seen more being put into price as a ratio there. Having said that, I still think there's a lot of opportunities for distributors not to pass on cost reductions or special rebate support to their customers.
I would hope they wouldn't. I'll be honest with you. I mean, look, net profit's tough enough in distribution. I just, if you can get a hold of that and put it into the bottom line, I mean, I think, that's really where we make a little cash. But boy, when they start throwing that out on the street, I think it's a bad deal.
Well, and it's worse when it's not a market-driven item that's competitive. Where they just take it and apply it to the entire line, and somebody buys one item once for $100 and you're lowering your price. You're lowering your unit profit, and it's not necessary.
It's just giving away money. It really is. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. One of the other areas that you had touched on in that article was non-stock items being priced too low. And this is one I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think, so tell us a little bit about that, what you've seen out there.
Oh, it's so painful to watch. It really is. If you take and compare most distributors' non-stock margin, it's within 5 points plus or minus their stock margin.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I found. Minus. And
Yeah.
it just kills me. It kills me.
And so then you say, well, maybe it's so low because these are very big orders. These are big items. So then you start going down to the really low level stuff where it's a real non-stock purchase. They're not buying it. They're not going to buy it again. They didn't spend much money when they did. Your guy or gal went out and researched it, did the work necessary, spent all of your money sourcing and pricing, and then you give it away at your average margin.
Yeah, or less.
Or less.
Yeah, or less.
I know.
Oh, I'm gonna put 20 on it, or I'm gonna put 20. And nobody knows how to price beyond the fives. 20, 25, 30. I mean, just it kills me.
I think there's a role for the salesperson being very much involved on a non-stock when it isn't an incidental sale or it's a big order. I think that makes sense.
That makes sense.
They have the knowledge. However, for them to be rolling over an automatic margin on a incidental non-stock sale is just money tossed away.
Yeah. And
you don't have to do that. You can use your ERP system to price these incidental non-stocks much the way you do your stock.
Okay. Yeah, because honestly, I remember a client specifically that their non-stock margin was 6% less than the stocking, margin. Yeah. And this represented at least, God, I want to say 35% of their sales.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking, oh, guys, and I think, again, my mind always says, hey, look, just the things that you were mentioning, you researched it, you had to go outside of your easy button to go and procure this. We should make more than our normal stock margin on this. I mean, it just logically that makes sense. But boy, in this company, it just didn't. And we spent an awful lot of time trying to unravel that thinking. It was really just thinking. It was between the ears. It was nothing to do with the software. It was all, people just didn't understand that, hey, wait a minute, you're spending more time on this.
Well, it is cultural. And I've had clients basically say, we look at non-stocks as a service we do to our customers. And yes, it is. It's a tremendous service they're providing, but they should at least be reimbursed for some of their costs to perform the service.
At least make what your stock is. My preference is that you're 6% higher than your normal average stock, margins. But that's a little bit of a battle. I think that's, and I think there's also, going back to your cultural comment, that people have a mental ceiling. We can't make above 36% margin or whatever their own, and each one has an individual mental ceiling, and if you exceed that ceiling, you're gouging. I'm gouging my customer.
Yes. We do a fair amount of training and orientation for pricing programs for sales organizations for our customers. And one of the exercises that we've done at times is we say, okay, here's the item that you sell. Where should you price this for a cash customer who's going to buy it once? And it's kind of fun because everybody writes down and then they show it. And there's usually a little bit of internal discussion between the salespeople.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Oh, I'd love to be in that room.
And so they're like, no, you're leaving money on the table. No, you don't want to ruin the relationship. And you hear all of the things that are crossing the mind of the average rep. So that's
brilliant, Dave. I'm like, oh, that would be fun. Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, try it sometime.
I am going to. I think I am going to steal that one.
Please.
Next time I get caught into one of these, I'm like, okay, I am going to, I'm definitely going to try that out. Well, Dave, is there any other areas that folks should be looking at? I mean, just something that they can take away from this and say, what could they go do right now if they just wanted to go look and grab something pretty easy, but just, that can make an impact right this minute?
One more thing I'll offer, and that is, and it depends on the industry, but distributors still have a lot of fixed price or net price pricing records in their system.
Yes. Yeah.
And there are those times where you have to do that because of the customer or for competitive reasons. But I'd argue that's the minority of the time.
Oh, sure. I would agree. Yeah.
And we found when distributors have fixed price records, they feel like they're getting, if they have a cost increase, they're maintaining that record. By paying us, they seldom do it, or they don't do it quick enough. My suggestion is today, get a list of your fixed or net price records and convert them to a margin or markup or discount basis.
Yeah. Make it variable. Yeah. Make it a multiplier thereof or whatever you may use. Yeah.
It'll be like writing yourself a check.
Yeah. It's got to be rolling. It has to roll with that cost, the new cost.
Yep.
It's got to move to that. No, I totally agree. And I think back in my life, I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, we would find customer net price deals that would be 3 years old, and we've had 3 price increases since that time, and you look at the margin, you're like, oh, that's not going to work. Oh, that's not going to work.
Yep, you got it. Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh yeah. So this is something, I mean, it's an age old problem, but it sounds like, you all are tackling it from a technology side. And if you could just in a few minutes, just tell us a little bit about the service that Profit2 provides to distribution.
Our customers hire us initially on a 1-year contract. And our responsibility is to do a complete analysis of their current pricing system and make overall recommendations. And those recommendations can include things we've talked about today: enriching how you stratify customers, change your contract pricing in these ways, modify your matrices that you have in your pricing module. But what we want to do is to work hand in hand with our customers to develop a methodology, as I mentioned earlier, that will stick, that will enable them to increase margin long term. Where we aim is down low at the low hanging fruit.
Sure.
We're typically impacting about 30% of our customers' sales. Our goal on average is to pick up about 5 points of margin on that set of sales and do that in the first 3 months.
Okay.
That's the analytical part. The other side of the coin is the behavioral part. As everyone well knows, we're in an industry where salespeople have a good deal of liberty in how they price. In fact, we put together some numbers not too long ago and found that initially with our customers, 45% of the time, the salespeople lowered the system price that was presented at the point of sale.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So part of our job is to replicate the pricing system of our clients on our servers. We look at every transaction and we basically say, here's how much you gained when you used the price. Here's how much you left on the table when you didn't. The process is not magic. It's not like turning on a light switch, but we've seen over time when our customers utilize the information that we send back to them to help coach and help their people use the pricing with greater frequency, it's a powerful impact.
So not wanting to put you too much on the spot here, but I mean, you said 5% on the bottom 30, but I mean, what does that really translate out to? I mean, what are most customers after, let's say, a year on the system? What is going to happen with the gross margin percentage?
Average client, about 1.6 to 1.7 margin points on total sales.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's, and I will say, I'm glad you put that number out there because that's tracking exactly with the person who referred me to you.
Oh,
who introduced me to you all, said 1.75, that's what they picked up in that 12-month period.
And I think it's important that at the same time, when we work together hand in hand with the client, it's not negatively impacting sales because the purchase frequency is so low. The dollar spend is so low of what we're impacting. They're relatively insensitive on price. Yeah.
Is there a size company, that somebody really needs to be in order to take advantage of your services? Can a $5 million distributor take advantage, or is it really a sweet spot more, 15 to 20 million in revenue?
Yeah, it's a little higher. Probably the minimum client size for us is in that 20 to 25 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes some sense. Yeah.
Yeah. We have clients our average client's probably closer to 75 or 80 million. And we have a few really, really large ones. But what we find as far as what we need is the ability to get information out of the ERP system that they're all of the modern ERP systems are very good at exporting transaction data, pricing data,
Sure.
and a lot of legacy systems that we work with, we're able to work with those too. But that's the key thing that we need is we need the raw ammunition to be able to do what we do.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Well, Dave, if somebody wants to engage you, how do they find you?
They can find us at profit2.com.
Okay.
And my email is dave@profit2.com.
Perfect. I will make sure that those are highlighted in the show notes. And, I'd love to have people find out a little bit more about you. And I did spend a little time on your website, and there's a lot of really good information there as well. You all did a nice job on that. So,
Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, thank you for coming on. It's always kind of fun talking about pricing. Pricing is one of those emotional things in a distribution business, and I really enjoy talking about that and kind of dispelling some of those myths that we have around it.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Take care, Dave, and I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.